Story 1. I stayed at a company that did not value my work or contributions. I missed many opportunities and must blame myself for lacking the courage to explore new options for my growth and development. Story 2. I was in a toxic relationship and did not understand how to invest in myself. I am still working on the second part. Story 3. My 20s were mostly a blur. I get flashbacks every once in a while. From what I remember, it was sad. Story 4. I wasted mine by having a poor body image and low self-esteem when I was actually thin and in shape. Story 5. I cared for others and always put them first. I always came after everyone else. Everything suffered. Everyone took advantage. Story 6. I was a legitimate mid-level drug dealer with a severe drug addiction, and I dated a stripper from age 20 to 28. Story 7. Laziness. I started getting my life together at 25, but I still feel perpetually behind at 30. Story 8. I went from partying as much as possible to working more than 330 days a year. Turns out you only have friends when you are the fun guy. Laughing out loud. Story 9. My job took me around the world in my 20s. I traveled to many interesting places and many not so interesting ones. I spent time with locals and saw things tourists never saw. It was an unforgettable experience. The problem was that I was a heavy drinker then. Instead of using my limited free time to learn about where I was and see the sights, I focused on drinking and visiting strip clubs. Yes, we did see some sights and do exciting things, but I could have done so much more. I passed up opportunities to explore while traveling so I could spend time in dank, smelly bars or strip clubs where men were leering at the performers. Story 10. I married my first boyfriend. We were not a good match. I essentially harmed my physical and mental health trying to be enough for him. I am 30 now, about 4 years divorced, much happier and learning what I want in life and who I want to be. Story 11. I did not exactly waste my life, but I mostly worked, went home and slept. I lost 95% of my friends and remained a virgin throughout my 20s. Now, 3 years past my 20s, I have a stable job and own my home, but I am very introverted, which does not help with being single. Story 12. I fell in love with a narcissistic, abusive person who snitched on me for being involved in his crimes. I spent 4 years of my life in jail. I lost time I'll never get back. Story 13. All these responses are actually making me feel a bit better about my wasted decade. All I did was play games. A combination of chronic pain and a crippling fear of strangers made me give up on a normal life and live as simple and frugal as I could. I couldn't get my driver's license because of fear, couldn't hold a job because of panic, have no friends or even many acquaintances, and can't afford most hobbies. I'm nearing my 40s now, and the experience at least helps me save money. I learned to enjoy things that are free and have even made money from some, like propagating plants from clippings. Took me my 20s to get going. By most people's standards, I continue to waste my life. Story 14. I have been staying in my bedroom, playing video games instead of living my life. Started when I was 18. I will be 26 in 8 days. Story 15. I am in my 20s but wasting them because I am afraid to venture out. I am an introvert. Story 16. I let my depression consume the last few beautiful years of my 20s after I lost my brother to suicide. I wish I had sought therapy sooner. Story 17. I was an alcoholic, but I got sober at age 30. Story 18. I spent it with my ex, who drove me into debt and depression and left me feeling like I might harm myself. If you are thinking about harming yourself or are in crisis, please seek help immediately. Call your local emergency number. If you are in the United States, call or text 988 or, in an emergency, call 911. You can also text HOME to 741741 for the crisis text line. If you are outside the United States, contact your local emergency services or a crisis hotline in your country. Story 19. I used to be overweight. I got extremely fit for my 30th birthday and haven't looked back. Story 20. About a relationship. I started dating him in high school and we broke up there as well. We bumped into each other after graduation, And for my entire 20s, I spent begging for love, basic respect, and care. We were on and off, but he would always have someone else and kept me around as a convenience. The amount of mistreatment I accepted is staggering. My 30-year-old self could never imagine accepting any of that. I am so mad I wasted my youth on him. He got to live his life while I lived in his shadow, watching him from the outside. I was never included. A whole decade of my life gone to appease someone who treated me worse than the dirt on his shoe. Story 21. A combination of a bar scene, playing Skyrim, gaining weight from beer, and then figuring things out in my 30s. Story 22. I worked too much. I have never had a full week off for vacation. I have nice material possessions, but I spent what may have been the best decade of my life punching a clock for a job I hate. Story 23. Long-distance relationships are not worth it, and I did it twice. Story 24. After reading the comments, I noticed many of the same issues. Drinking and drug use, excessive gaming, working too much, and getting married early. Story 25. I borrowed money from my parents to live in substandard apartments and took longer than I should have to finish university. I graduated feeling 4 or 5 years behind everyone else and left with more debt than I otherwise would have had. Story 26. About half of it was spent trying to maintain a relationship that was destined to fail. If I had seen it the way I see it now, I would have gained about 5 years by not being stressed and confused. Story 27. I impregnated a woman I barely liked, married her out of obligation, and the marriage was terrible. It lasted only 3 months. I worked low-paying jobs to provide for my son and was required to pay child support. I became depressed and gained weight. My dreams went down the drain. Now I am overweight, older, and poor. Story 28. I was not taking my mental health seriously. I was surrounding myself with the wrong people. Story 29. I married my best friend. Now that I am 35, he does not love me anymore and wants a divorce. I am so angry thinking of all the youth I wasted on him. Story 30. Going to medical school and becoming a doctor. If you want a personal or social life outside of work, I would rate it 0 out of 10 and would not recommend. Edit. Looking at some of these comments, there are worse ways to spend your 20s, but the sentiment still stands. Story 31. I'm 26, so I still have a lot of time, but playing League daily was a huge waste. The coronavirus disease taking 3 years from my life made it worse. I had to rush through a year of clubbing and dating, though I did meet my current girlfriend that way. I also worked many unnecessary part-time jobs that I did not really need. Story 32. I was drinking and smoking cannabis. Then my dad died when I was 26, and I woke up. Story 33. By not doing anything, I became a hermit around age 23 and did little except sit in my basement and play video games. As my friends moved away, my social life went with them and I never went out to build a new one. Instead, I sat at home and watched the world go by. Story 34. Without medication, I was seriously dysfunctional and didn't even know it. Story 35. I missed many experiences because I was afraid of being uncomfortable, embarrassed, or not being liked. I'm 29 and I hardly have any stories about my life. I can't hold deep or meaningful conversations because of that lack of experience. I feel so bland, and it sucks. Story 36. I was working 2 jobs and living hand to mouth with no social life. I felt like I was in a hurry yet moving nowhere. Living with roommates left me one emergency away from being broke. At least one of my jobs was at a veterinary clinic, and it gave me a sense that what I did mattered to a vulnerable population, the animals under our care. Story 37. World of Warcraft, an obscure internet message board, and a dead-end job. Story 38. World of Warcraft. Not a total waste of my 20s. I definitely had a lot of other things going on. But yikes, that was a lot of time spent on the grind with no payday. Story 39. Divorced at 21. Moved to another state at 22 with no prospects or plans. Joined the army at 23 and left at 27. Started university at 28 and earned a bachelor's degree at 33. Story 40. I trusted the wrong people and began using cocaine heavily. The fun lasted about a year. It was not long before I realized that the people I considered friends only enjoyed my company when I provided drugs and alcohol. One day, as a joke, they filmed me using cocaine and posted it on social media. By the end of the week, I had been fired and kicked out of my home by my parents. I fell into a deep depression and attempted to kill myself with painkillers. I spent the rest of my 20s trying to get sober and struggling with trust. Story 41. Socializing with people you thought were your friends, especially those from high school, only to discover they were not. Story 42. I did not start investing, pursue enjoyable activities, or choose the right partner. Story 43. The years from 20 to 26 were wasted. They were fairly boring. I did not pursue proper relationships and I was afraid to engage with life. This was sad because I had been confident in high school, but leaving my hometown for university hit me harder than I had expected. I went through many milestones embarrassingly late compared with other young men of the early 2000s, which made me self-conscious. I met a woman who eventually became my wife, so the years from 27 to 30 were better. Story 44. I helped others who betrayed me and did not get a job earlier. Story 45. I dated a girl for 6 years, only to have her break up with me randomly one day over text. Life is weird. Story 46. I skied every day until the snow melted. Then I partied all summer until it snowed. I repeated the cycle until I grew old. The seasons never aged, only I did. Story 47. I did a lot of mushrooms, got into mysticism, and traveled around the country. I watched a lot of pornography, worked on a farm, and was almost always single. I made some friends and lost some friends. I grew up a lot, though not nearly enough. Story 48. I went to college, graduated, and now I cannot find a job. I could have been working, gaining experience, and earning money this whole time instead of spending those years in college. Story 49. I knew a girl who became pregnant at 21 and spent many years dealing with a cheating husband and difficult relationships throughout her 20s. Story 50. I took out a large student loan to attend film school. I spent my 20s as an actor crippled by the debt. I lost my agent at 29. Story 51. I got married a few days after I turned 20. I was miserable and divorced by 25 with 2 children. Story 52. I keep visiting this subreddit and reading the same annoying posts every week. Story 53. I could not see past next Friday night. There was a lot of drinking. No long-term goals were achieved. Story 54. I spent 5 years of my 20s in a relationship with someone who was manipulative and emotionally abusive toward me. She lived in another state, so I spent countless weekends driving there to see her instead of living my life. Story 55. Methamphetamine, alcohol, and people who were never really there or who never cared for me. Story 56. I was mostly drinking. It came to a head in my mid-30s, and life has improved greatly since I put that bottle down for good. Story 57. I chose the wrong thing to study. I really liked it, but it is not great for getting a job, so now I am getting nowhere and I will probably be poor for the rest of my life. Story 58. The beginning was still quite productive in a lot of ways. I got into law school at age 22 and was one of the youngest in my class. But the first half of my 20s, and most things before that frankly, were wasted because my mother is an evangelical, homophobic Christian who divorced my father for being abusive, then married another abusive man and chose him over her children. So I was in the closet and stayed in relationships for far too long with abusive people, because I thought that was the way life was. When my brother or I had breakups, my mother would freak out and get very upset. She made it clear she thought we had made a big, awful mistake, and she even cried once. I mean, we were in high school. You can see why I had some self-esteem issues. Then, when I was 25, things turned around. I officially came out, met a nice woman, and married her a couple of years later. I got a job in another city and moved there sight unseen. Not only could I take care of myself, I excelled. I got the hang of my job, made friends, started therapy, and did important work in my community that I am proud of. I'm 35 now, and for the most part, the last 10 years have been very good to me. Story 59. To echo another comment, I worked too much in the hope that it would set me up for the future. It did not. I earned a Doctor of Philosophy in the Humanities. It felt like a useless major. I gave up friends and fun in my 20s, and now I have no career or friends. Story 60. I got high and became addicted to pills. I pretty much threw everything away and will probably never get it back. Story 61. In a relationship with a controlling, emotionally abusive person. Story 62. I was married to an abuser. I left when I was 28. What a fucking waste. Story 63. I stopped drinking 4 years ago, and life is worth living again. Story 64. I am wasting them now, and I do not know how to make it stop. It is breaking my heart. Story 65. Drinking and being promiscuous with many women was a good time. I wish I had drunk less and saved more. Story 66. Drugs and booze. I wish I had listened when they said don't do drugs. I said it then, and yet someone reading this right now is high and ignoring it just like I did. If I could see myself 10 years ago with what I know now, I would have beaten myself to near death trying to hammer that point home. I mean, tied up and waterboarded until I accepted one fact. Don't do drugs. It would have been my religion. I am resigned to years of chemical and emotional trauma to my body and mind that I will be fighting for the rest of my life. My reward system is ruined. Dopamine? I do not have enough. Anxiety lives with me. I am emotionally stunted. Do not do drugs. Avoid marijuana and alcohol and all of that. Find something else. Want to tattoo your face? Fine. Want to skydive? Go for it. Want to drive fast? Do it, but be careful. There is one irreversible fact. Drugs were the worst decision of my life, and they ruined my 20s. Story 67. I had an eating disorder. I had no energy and spent many beautiful days inside because I was too scared to socialize, or I would go to the gym to try to work off what I ate when I did socialize. Recover in your 20s so you do not have to in your 30s, when the damage is harder to repair. Your body, brain, and lifespan will thank you. Story 68. I was a virgin until age 26. I am an alcoholic. The duration is to be determined. I earn 6 figures, but I am very lonely and not okay. Story 69. I have struggled with alcoholism. I am 40 now, and I will be 6 years sober in August. Story 70. I am 21 and I feel like I am wasting this time because I have no social life. My mother still dictates if and when I may leave the house. I have never gone anywhere alone except for school. I have not been able to socialize, get a job, make friends, or form real relationships. I know I am getting older and I am an adult now, but in my mind I am still the 12-year-old who had to handle too much at a young age. Story 71. I spent too much time inside playing video games when I could have been out exploring the local hills and lakes. Story 72. I got married at 19 and had my first child at 21. My wife and I spent our 20s raising a family instead of building the foundation for it. I was blindsided by divorce at 27 after 3 children. Things hit rock bottom for a while, but I finally started to turn the corner around 32. Story 73. I married someone I thought was the love of my life, gave him my young years, and now it's hell. Story 74. I got sloppy drunk and behaved embarrassingly. A third person discovered me, and I remembered nothing. This was a non-drug-related incident. I never saved $1. I have always had a job and should have been putting money away from day one. Now I'm playing financial catch-up. Story 75. I was unemployed for a long time and spent far too much time playing World of Warcraft. Story 76. Obsessed with finding a boyfriend and putting up with many jerks. Story 77. I was a shut-in who focused on pacing myself through college. I have no regrets, especially about my non-existent love life. There are so many people in their early 30s who have more children than they can afford. Story 78. I drank, used drugs, and hooked up with anyone who was interested in me. Story 79. Military service, depression, and a lack of courage to do what I really wanted to do. Story 80. All of my health issues keep me from leaving the house and living my life, so I am wasting my 20s by staying inside. Story 81. I stayed in the closet and felt like I could not date for fear of being found out. Story 82. I quit everything, moved to Colorado to work on a dude ranch, and then became a ski instructor. 30 years later, I am still happily here. Story 83. I'm not sure I want to call it a waste, but I was an active alcoholic from ages 22 to 26. I lost a lot of time and money and had no drive or determination. Those years flew by, and I became so depressed that I forgot who I was. I have been sober for 18 months, and I turned 28 on Friday. Story 84. I experienced severe mental health problems and thought that smoking cannabis and drinking alcohol would help me cope. It did not. Story 85. I ate everything I wanted, thinking I would die from severe obesity by 30. Now I have knee pain. Story 86. I am 28 and about a year and a half from turning 30. Due to lifelong poor mental health and childhood emotional neglect, I have always had trouble with executive function, mainly habit formation, emotional control, and attention. I have gone months without brushing my teeth, washing my sheets, cutting my toenails, or cleaning my room, and I have gone days without basic chores like doing the dishes. I spent nearly all of my free time in my 20s watching television, watching YouTube, and surfing the web. That, along with a poor diet, caused me to be morbidly obese for most of my adult life and to develop type 2 diabetes, sleep apnea, and stage 3 kidney disease. My indolence and unproductive behavior kept me from finding steady work and made it easy to shirk responsibilities when I was working. When I did substitute food service for the local school district, calling in was optional, which made it easy to miss work for days at a time. Now, when I work, I usually try my best or at least do the minimum expected. Sometimes that is the best I can do. There was one work opportunity that could have changed the course of my 20s and my life. I was accepted into the California Conservation Corps and was dismissed from training 2 official days in because I made a racist joke. These problems with my mind and body, and with personal hygiene, have caused me to avoid dating for most of my adult life. I tried online dating and apps and had occasional successes, but nothing lasting. My last relationship was long distance and ended in mid-2017. With a non-existent dating life has come a non-existent sex life. I am still a virgin. Academically, I have poor study habits. I am entering my 7th and, hopefully, final year of college this August. Altogether, I am depressed, reclusive, morbidly obese, diabetic, living with stage 3 kidney disease, unhygienic, lazy, single, a 28-year-old virgin still in undergraduate studies, working a part-time job, and living with the same emotionally neglectful father I have lived with since age 1. Story 87. Their names were Brian and Rob. There was so much wasted time, energy, and emotion. Do you know what I got out of it? A lesson. I have that going for me. Story 88. I worked in the Western Australian mines and saved a large amount of money. I flew to Europe and spent it all trying to become a professional race car driver. I failed happily and have continued to fail and succeed in different areas of life since. It is all good. Story 89. Agoraphobia. I went through a period in my 20s when I left my house only about twice a month. My mental health was terrible. I was vitamin deficient, and an untreated thyroid disorder had severely affected my brain and body. I am still recovering but much better now. Story 90. I did not go to a psychotherapist sooner to talk through my issues. Story 91. I was taking care of everyone else but myself. When I finally got away, no one checked in on me. Story 92. I spent most of my 20s building my career and education. Every summer, I took more courses or internships until I landed a full-time job. Of course, it was not time wasted, but I do think about how I did not travel at all in my 20s. Now that I am in my 30s, I would like to start traveling, but all my friends are either married or busy working or pursuing education. Life is strange. We cannot have it all. We should make the most of the time we are given. Story 93. I grew up in a religious household and was raised by my grandparents. By the time I turned 20, I married my girlfriend. The marriage ended in divorce because I was far too immature. After that, I pushed the throttles full speed ahead, trying to make up for lost time. Drinking, drugs, and any woman who showed interest were on the table. I hitchhiked to California to my father's house and was a miserable excuse for a son and a person. I went nowhere fast. Was it fun? Sure, in the moment. Then one day, after stumbling in at 8 in the morning after spending the night in Hollywood clubs with a friend and a couple of German women we picked up, I lay in bed and thought what the hell I was doing and where it was getting me. I finally slowed down, took stock of my life, and gradually made changes. I am not yet where I want to be, but many of the lessons have stayed with me. I still made bad choices, but far fewer, and I considered the consequences more. I am on medication now and feeling much better, although this has been a rough couple of weeks because a dear friend passed away. I will make it. Story 94. By being stupid, disoriented, undisciplined, naive, and too good. Story 95. By not knowing that I was clinically depressed, transgender, and autistic. Aside from being transgender, because the implications of that are obvious, I had lived my whole life with diagnosable depression and autism without knowing it. I really struggled with jobs, though I thought I was doing pretty well. I dropped out of university 3 or 4 times. I would have been eligible for extra help and special consideration, and I probably could have finished a degree in one attempt and moved on to whatever followed. Instead, I seriously damaged my mental health, thinking I was a failure for no reason and not worth anything because I could not keep it together for more than a year of study at the time. I am happy enough with my life now, but it would have turned out very differently, and arguably much better, if I had known then what I know now. Story 96. I went to graduate school. If I had stayed in the job market, I would be earning more. Story 97. Many people would consider my 20s wasted because I did little to better myself. I worked dead-end, entry-level jobs, smoked a lot of pot, dated many women, saw tons of bands at venues ranging from stadiums and arenas to basements, and lived a stereotypical Generation X slacker lifestyle. I do not consider my 20s wasted. Sometime in my 30s, I realized 30 is the new 20, and I got my act together quickly. Now I have a decent life with a fun, interesting career and a family life I enjoy. Could I be further along if I had started a decade earlier? Probably. But as a middle-aged man sitting in an air-conditioned office inside a world-famous art museum, I look back on memories of partying with friends, many of whom died young, and I have zero regrets. I have also realized this: which middle-aged man never has a midlife crisis? The man who partied like a crazy person in his 20s. We do not sit around wondering what we missed, and we know that if we tried to relive it, we would look like buffoons and probably pull something. Story 98. I joined the army, jumped out of airplanes, and went to war. Now I have bad knees and vivid dreams. Story 99. I refused to admit to myself that I was queer and transgender. I am much happier now in my 30s as a transgender woman. Definitely laughing out loud. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.